Hey everybody, this is Britton here. If you are new to this group, Raising Children for Greatness, welcome. Today's going to be a fun topic. I'm going to talk about what's going on in the world right now, actually in the US and around the world, but right now. I actually had something else planned out, so we'll see how this goes. This is going to be totally off the cuff. I had something all planned out, but it felt insensitive to talk about something else, and it just seemed out of touch to go in and talk about something else when there's so many major things going on in the country right now. And when we talk about giving children a great education or raising them for greatness, one of the things we said is their education has to be organic and it has to be in tune with the real world. We call that, like a living curriculum. So there's going to be classics that we read for sure. Every kid has to learn how to read and they're going to need to know some things from history. But there is a time to just set the books down and a time to set the books down and start just looking around the world. And right now is one of those times. Not only are we in an election year, but we had this crazy pandemic thing that happened. And I said at that time, I'm like, this is a great time to talk about health. It's a great time to talk about pandemics. We also had a coincidence that oil crashed at the same time. So that was an interesting thing. Me and my kids, we talked about oil a ton. Was that a coincidence? That's something else to talk about. Those are two major things that absolutely devastated our economy. And we'll get into that in just a minute. It seems like the clouds are kind of blowing over finally. The economy is recovering. I don't think anybody cared about coronavirus anymore. People were pretty much just going out and doing whatever they wanted. At Memorial Day, it didn't seem, at least where I am, it didn't seem like anybody cared or even remembered that there was a coronavirus. Everybody's kind of moved on. And then, of course, something hits us, something major that we haven't seen in a long, long time. We've seen little pockets of it, but major riots and tension. I mean, almost like we've never seen before, not for a long time in this country. Again, is this another coincidence? Is this an election year? Or is it something worse? These are things that we need to talk about our kids. It's the real world. It's great to study all that old history that's happened. It's really important and relevant today. It's more important to understand what's going on right now too. Current events, super important. I think so many kids, they won't even know who their president is. They go through education. You ask a senior who the president is, they probably know now. He's such a high profile Trump, but a lot of times they won't even know who their president is. And you think, man, you studied all that stuff from the past. It's great, George Washington was the first, but you don't know what's going on right now. That's even more important. Today I wanted to talk about not just what's going on, but I wanted to talk about how we look at the events going on right now. We have the pandemic. We had the oil crash. Now we have riots and we're in election year. There's a lot of really weird things going on. So I want to help your kids understand and analyze what's going on. They're not going to be able to know exactly, figure it out, but that's part of the learning process too, is to accept that, I can have a theory, but I might not know everything. And it's actually ignorant to jump out and pretend like you know what's going on and you have this narrative and you just perpetuate it when we're so far away and we don't have all of the details. So it's really important that kids understand the difference between fact, fiction, and theory. So fact is just what we know. So in this latest case, we know that a white police officer, for example, I'm going to go there. I don't even care if I lose subscribers. I'm not going to give you my opinion necessarily, but I'm just going to help you analyze it because it's important. But, and I debated it too. I thought, man, do I really want to bring this up? Yeah, it's totally relevant right now. So let's just talk about the facts. The facts in this case, we have a white police officer, actually several white police officers holding down an African-American man. You can look at this a whole bunch of ways. You can say it was a police officer holding down someone who's breaking the law, a criminal. And that's one narrative. You could look at the skin color and say that it's a white man holding down a black man, and that'd be a different narrative. You could also say, some people have just decided it's murder. I don't know how many people... it just shocks me how many people are just decided that it's a murder. Very interesting. If you want to tell your kids that, I think that would be foolish. We know that a white police officer killed a black man. We don't know that it's murder yet, and that's why we have a process of justice. We have to show intent. Certainly he killed him. I would say that's pretty obvious. Some people are saying that it was because he was on drugs or he had a heart attack, but I bet he wouldn't have had that heart attack if people weren't sitting on his chest and on his neck and stuff like that. So either way, obviously the police officer is responsible for the death, but that doesn't mean it's murder. That fact isn't out yet. We'd have to have a trial to determine that. And the reason I say we don't know that it's murder, and if you're one of those people rushing to those conclusions, it may fit your narrative, it may fit your political agenda and feel good, but you're doing yourself a disservice, you're lying to yourself, and you're doing your kids a disservice because you're teaching them to rush to judgment. And that is not an established fact yet. We don't know what his intent was. I know from doing martial arts for a long time and wrestling, so I know what that kind of pressure is. I would actually imagine that the guy who had his, it looks really bad, the knee on the neck, that probably, it might not have been as bad, this is my opinion, is the guy behind him who looked like he had his knees on his chest or his back. When we do jiu-jitsu and you're fighting a big guy, the first thing you do is roll from your side, off your back to your side. And that's because then it puts all this pressure here and you can actually breathe this way. But when somebody's on your chest, and I've wrestled guys that are 250, 300 pounds, and they have all that pressure in their chest, it's almost impossible to breathe. So that could have been a factor that they didn't mean to, but they were handling him roughly, they weren't careful, and they accidentally killed him. And that is a theory. We don't know. It's not fiction, it's a theory. We know the fact, we would teach our kids the fact is, this police officer killed this man. It could be through negligence. It could have been through hate. It could have been a murder. Hey, Brianna, glad to see you here. So that would be the fact. And then the theory would be that it could have been racial. It could have been just police brutality. It could have been an intentional murder. And it could have been accidental. The guy was being filmed. I mean, he'd be a cold-blooded killer and a stupid one to just willfully murder the guy on camera. Do I think it's murder? Probably not. I don't know, though. Those are just theories. Another interesting theory going around right now, one is a conspiracy theory because it is an election year, and it is very convenient, we would say, or really unlucky that we had the economy crash 6 months out from an election, and now we have race riots. But again, that even to perpetuate that is a theory. It's not fiction because it's based on facts, but we don't actually know. We could just be super unlucky. It could just be a coincidence that we've had the worst pandemic in 100 years happen right now, supposedly. And then oil crashed. It could just be a coincidence that all of a sudden Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China went in against the U.S. They decided to start a trade war right now, and it had nothing to do with coronavirus. And it could be a coincidence that this incident happened. I'm not saying that it was planned or anything, but for it to blow up like this sort of stuff happens all the time. You're always going to have, anytime you have a huge police force, there's always going to be incidents like this, and they should be investigated. They should be looked into. If it's murder, it should move forward. That's always going to happen, but for this to blow up, hasn't blown up like this in a long time. I think it's been like more than 60 years. It's been a long time since we've seen this level of upheaval going all the way back to the 60s. So is this a coincidence? I don't know. The facts is just that it's happening, and then we can tie a narrative to it. What really concerns me, especially when we talk about raising kids for greatness, is I already know, if I know your political affiliation, I already know what you think the facts are. I already know what your narrative is. And that shows right away that you're not thinking intellectually, you're not analyzing the facts. You're just jumping on board with a narrative that's been pre-written and is political. How come almost all of the Democrats believe that it was a racist murder, and a ton of the Republicans on the other side are saying, no, I guess some of them are agreeing that it might be a racist murder, but they're definitely not jumping on the bandwagon. There's a systemic racism in society. How come you have it's almost blanket? It's not all these individuals analyzing the facts like rational people. If everybody is pretty much in the party coming to the same conclusion, it just doesn't happen. It means that they're picking up a narrative, and it's really important to teach your kids the difference between a narrative, a theory, and a fact. I hope that makes sense. The narrative, when we talk about truth and narrative, the narrative is like the racism, that it was tied to racism. That's kind of like a narrative. That's not a fact. You can't prove that yet. You can't prove the intent of his heart yet. So that's not a fact. That's a theory. That's a narrative. And the problem with this is they have decided, certain people, that we live in a racist society, and that might be true. They've decided that, but now they analyze everything through that narrative. So whenever they see a white police, sorry, I just plugged in my phone. I hope it doesn't go out on me. Whenever they see a white man and a black man and there's some sort of confrontation, or the white man is mistreating the black man, they assume immediately that there's a racial connotation. White people fight all the time. White people fight with other white people. White people fight with different races, and it's not always tied to racism. So that's a narrative, and you have to be really careful perpetuating that. I don't know if that police officer is racist, and I don't know is a fact that he meant to kill him or murder him. I don't know that. I just know the facts that the guy that he did kill him. I don't know the intent of his heart. As far as the conspiracy theory about the election goes, I will say this. If you studied history, it's something to talk about because we've seen this play out many, many times. If you study the French Revolution, if you study when the communists overthrew, most people don't even know they did, when the communists overthrew Germany before Hitler came to power. So during World War I, the communist Soviet-backed communists actually overthrew Germany. The Kaiser had to flee the country. We saw all of these similar things. I don't just mean with the riots. I mean, it's funny, they're talking about, we haven't seen this kind of sickness since, gosh, it was the flu. I think it was, the 1920s or something like that, 1917 or something, Spanish flu. Look it up. But it's interesting the year because 1917, of course, in that time period is the exact same time they were overthrowing Germany and the exact same time that they were overthrowing the Russian Soviet Union. So we have this huge pandemic, epidemic flu at the exact same time those revolutions were happening and the riots, and it was all tied together and most of it was orchestrated. A lot of people think that the Spanish flu was not a fluke. It was not a random pandemic. I am one of those people who think it probably wasn't an accident or a freak of nature. People think that it was definitely tied to that war effort and the revolutionary effort. So if you think, man, if they really are trying to overthrow this guy, it could be coordinated. So that makes sense. And we're seeing all the things fall in line. We're seeing multiple countries target us with oil. We're seeing a pandemic, which we don't even know how serious it is anymore. We don't know. I'm sorry. I had corona. I think I had coronavirus. People in my gym had it. It wasn't that serious. Seemed like a normal flu. We don't know how serious it is because we can't trust the media to give us the facts either. But we're seeing all of these things happen at the same time. And generally speaking, the same thing happened to the French Revolution. All of these things came together. The economy was crashed and they were trying to overthrow a government. So luckily we have a democracy. I don't think that they'll overthrow the entire system, but there's certainly, that is one theory, trying to remove somebody from office by just making everything go to hell. So people are like, dude, just forget it. It's not worth it. Let's vote somebody else in. So that is a theory, but it's a theory. I don't know that. It's you can say it's a conspiracy theory. So again, it's not a fact. It's a conspiracy theory. But if you just reject conspiracy theories, you're a very ignorant person too. You haven't studied any history. Conspiracy has written history. So I entertain them sometimes. But again, we have to say, okay, does the facts back it? And then also remember that it is still a theory. We don't know that. It's a narrative. It's a theory. So anyway, I don't want to go any farther than that. If you want to know more about kind of like a deeper narrative, like what is really going on in this country, who are the people that run it, that book is coming out in 2 years or a year and a half. That'll be The Enemy. But I will just say this, there is, in my opinion, a three-party system. There's the Republicans, the Democrats, and then there's kind of the ruling class. And they tend to operate within both of the parties. And they definitely had a huge hand in establishing the public school system. The public school system, they've been trying to fix it forever and make it better and better and better. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. They're never going to fix it. And that's by design. And you could say it's a conspiracy theory. I think I've proven it. I think I've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's a 450-page book. And yeah, it is still in the realm of theory. There's some stuff that I have to insinuate. But we'll see how this plays out in the next few months, but it is kind of scary, and gosh, and it's played out so many other times in history, and all of the elements are there that this could definitely be something serious. If I just went on a hunch, I'd say that this is orchestrated, that they're absolutely trying to take down the president. Maybe remake America. The communists, they did it in Spain, exactly the same thing. The Spanish flu, exactly the same thing. They were overthrowing that country, just so you know. And that was like step one. Step two, like they crashed the economy. We're not in a war, thank God, and hopefully that doesn't come next. There's a ton of tension. But if that happens, then it's almost a guarantee. Like this is absolutely orchestrated. And then things will be really scary. But this is a time to have your kids. I had them watch. I don't care if it's scary or not. Like I had them watch the riot. Some of them and say, "Look at this. This is what the police guy did. You know, what do you think? This is horrible." But now look at these riots. I want them to see what's really going on because some of it's scary. These people are extremely violent. They're beating people, killing people in the street. They said in Houston they were busting in bricks. So this is not a spontaneous uprising. This is well orchestrated. And again, if you study the French Revolution, the Communist Revolution, these are all the same revolutions. These are the same people, and these are the same tactics. So it could be a coincidence, or it could be history repeating itself again. And now that doesn't mean it's the end of the world and they're going to win. And if you study like Russian history, you know that before that revolution, I mean, they tried to take down so many czars. It was poor Nicholas who they finally got. But they'd been, I mean, the overthrow of Russia had been in the works for several hundred years. Same with the overthrow of France. I mean, there were revolutions. They were trying to overthrow France for a long time before they got him. So is it the end of the world? No, not necessarily, but it doesn't mean that they're not involved, and it doesn't mean that it's not orchestrated. And those are things I'd be talking about with my kids, not to scare them, but just to help them think through. And the other thing is because this country is so politically divided, I talk about that with my kids too. I see some stuff people post. I remember one time they were talking about how, oh gosh, they were going to give us money, but it was a stimulus, that we're going to have to pay back this interest, and it was actually going to raise our tax bracket, so we're going to have to pay more in taxes, and so we'd actually have a net loss. And again, these are people that I support. I like lower taxes for sure. It's just not how it works. That's not how the tax system works. If you bump above a certain point, you're not taxed on all the money below at that percentage. It's just on the money above that percentage. So it's just a false narrative, and it was coming from people on my side. It's so easy to just hit the like button and be like, yeah, whatever. But it's just not true. And it's happening on the other side too. People are... There's a lot of fake news on both sides. And if we want to raise our children for greatness, they need to be able to analyze things for themselves. They need to know what's going on in the country. There's so much chaos that they're trying to create, and it's being perpetuated by both sides. I mean, do you think Nancy Pelosi, an election year 6 months out, is going to ever say that Trump did anything good, ever? Even if it's true. Even if he cured cancer. No. She's the head of a party. She's trying to win. She can't admit he did anything good. And it goes vice versa. And so you're going to get these narratives that are often skewed. And then other people say, well, I'm just going to go in the middle because that's not where truth is either. You have to be able to understand the facts and narrative and separate the two. And then at the end of the day, to understand that you may not be able to get to the truth, and that's okay. We can still analyze the world. We can still react in it. I know how I'm handling my finances, looking at what's going on in the economy and this unrest. So just being able to analyze the situation and know what you know and what you don't know, and then just be prepared for the theories. It's good to theorize because you can, you're kind of troubleshooting. It's like the war room. Like, if this really is a revolution, what am I going to do? If this coronavirus lasted until November, the economy would be shot beyond imagination. So what do you do? And this is a great lesson for your kids too. Like, hey, remember, and I told my kids this too, I'm like, remember how quickly things can change. Because, one day your stocks are soaring and everything's good. And literally within a month, oil crashed from a high of WTI was $65 a barrel to -40. If you had oil futures, there were people who bought oil futures at a penny and they thought, dude, if it goes up a penny, I doubled my money, I'll be so rich. And it went to -40. They didn't even know that was possible. I actually didn't either. Anyway, it's a fun story. It never been happened before in history. So that's another great lesson for your kids. Hey, listen, be careful. You think you're flying high, you're making good money, the economy can turn on you in a second. So these are all important things to discuss with your kids. I think this stuff is every bit as important as the grammar and the penmanship and the science that we do. Kids need to be able to look out there. They need to know what's going on. They need to be able to analyze it and apply it to their lives. So that stuff's just as important. We study so much history. We don't study enough current events. I know a lot of parents, they don't want to scare their kids, so they kind of keep away from the TV. I don't let my kids watch the news very much, unless it's to point out something that's totally fake. Just say, hey, listen, the people on the TV lie to you all the time. But they do need to know what's going on. And so I definitely sift through that. I love that we have smartphones now. People are like, oh, these are peaceful protests. Well, we can see them. We can see them with smartphone now. We know that they're not peaceful. We know some of them are very violent. And then there's theories. Some are saying it's white supremacists that are doing it. I think that's been disproven from some of the videos. But people are saying that, and that could be a theory. People are also saying that this Antifa group has infiltrated these peaceful protests. That's very likely. That's very possible. There's probably a lot of bad apples, like ruining like a good, meaningful protest. But these are all things that we're discussing with our family. Like, analyze it, watch it. I want my kids to be able to see it in real time too. Like, so sometimes, we get on there and we watch YouTube and say, hey, look at these riots are happening, and why is it happening, and is this a good way to solve it? I mean, if there's systemic racism and injustice and murder, from our police state, is this uprising necessary? These are all things you have to kind of war room with your kids. So many times we just accept a narrative. And that goes for not just events today, but past history, like the French Revolution or the American Revolution. Everybody knows the American Revolution was like Jesus Christ pretty much led it, and it was God ordained and stuff like that. And every patriot was perfect. They didn't do anything wrong. And if anybody says otherwise, it's because they're a communist and they just hate our godly founded country. But that's just not history. You go back, you look at some of the things the Tea Party did, you couldn't justify it. It's unjustifiable. It was terrorist actions. And I remember years ago as a young, naive kid, some professor said that some of the the Sons of Liberty were terrorists themselves. I remember getting so upset, thinking, how dare them? You know, those are founding fathers, and this was a righteous cause, and they were all Christian and stuff. And then you look back and you say, oh no, like these were the same people who did the French Revolution. Many of them just like right after the American Revolution went over to France, helped overthrow it. They were bad people. They arrested tax collectors, pouring it, you know, boiling water down their throat, burned down their houses, terrorized their families. I can't justify that. Do I think that it was a good thing, good intention? Do I think they were good people? Absolutely. But we don't have to whitewash it. We don't have to pretend that everything was perfect and it was that black and white. There's actually what is it? Gosh, I think it's Liberty Kids. I think they do a pretty good job because they're totally biased, obviously, in favor of the revolution, but they kind of show both sides of it. I thought it was pretty good. And I think it's really important that we teach history that way, that we remove the narrative. We're very careful that we're not preaching narratives. We're not talking about theory. We're separating fact and theory and just teaching like the facts. Here's what we know happened, kids. And ask your kids, like, okay, here's what these guys did. They didn't want to pay this tea tax. They dressed up like Indians, which today would not be okay. That's appropriation. But they dressed up like Indians. They went on the boats and they throw somebody else's tea in the harbor, these merchant ships. That's very applicable to what's going on. They were destroying people's property, just like it's going on there. It was like for a good cause. And then you ask your kids, like, do you think that's acceptable? Is that okay? I'm not saying it is or it isn't. Maybe it is. But let's not just assume because we did it that time, it was okay, but it's not okay now. Or if it is okay now and it wasn't okay then, or vice versa, like what is the difference? Have these discussions with your kids. Don't propagandize them. Teach them to think, to separate fact, fiction, and theory. And not to be biased. There are things I disagree with that the Republicans, you know, there was a Republicans Day thing, and I tend to be more that way. Don't unsubscribe, okay? I'm a decent person. But I remember like they were celebrating Lincoln, and I know the truth about Lincoln. So I'm just like, you know what? I appreciate the thought. I know what they think he stands for, and I can get behind that. Like they think he fought a war to end slavery, and that's a good thing, and I can get behind that, even if it's not true. And I can prove it's not true. I can prove it. It's beyond a shadow of a doubt now. That's not opinion, okay? It's a false history. They taught you a false history. Lincoln, when he was first elected, he gave a speech saying, people are accusing me of that I might want to end slavery. And let me say, it's the farthest thing from my mind. And then after the war starts, he goes before Congress and gives this huge speech. And by the way, he doesn't mention slavery, but the war started, and he talks all about preserving the Union, but doesn't mention slavery. And oh yeah, and he waited 2 years into the war before emancipating the slaves. He didn't, not at the beginning. 2 years into the war, he left them in slavery. Oh, and then he left all the northern states, which people don't even know that northern states had slaves. I think there were 5 slave states in the north. This is when we were a small country. There weren't that many states. 5 is a big number. So you have all these slave states sided with the north. Did they think that they were fighting to end slavery? I doubt it. Listen to Lincoln Douglas debates when he talks about slavery. He actually sounds pretty racist, Lincoln. And did you know that Lincoln, the abolitionists in the North, Christian abolitionists, actually ran an abolitionist candidate against Lincoln because he wouldn't end slavery. So they wanted like a new president who would end slavery. And yet today he's Jesus Christ. But again, I was there. I didn't need to raise a stink. They think they're honoring a guy for a good thing, and I can get behind what they think they're honoring the guy for, so I just went with it. I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but it's just talking about like fake history and those narratives that get perpetuated. And then people say, oh, well, if you think the Civil War wasn't about slavery, it's because you're racist. Wait a second, if I was racist, I'd be like, yeah, it was about slavery and the South should have won. No, I'm just saying that, no, like Lincoln was not the savior of the black people. He basically freed him in the middle of the war. He was hoping that there'd be an uprising in the South to tip the war in his favor. And I'm only perpetuating that because it's the fact. If it wasn't a fact and he was, I would teach it that way. In fact, we have books on Blue Manor that I wrote that say that Lincoln ended the Civil War because that is what I thought was fact back then. And then after studying and studying and studying, my narrative was, hey, Sharon, how you doing? My narrative was debunked. And so I had to say, man, do I continue to teach the lie? Because it's more popular and it's more acceptable? Or do I teach my children what really happened? The same thing, the harder one for me was the American Revolution, because I was one of those guys that like every one of our founding fathers was Jesus, almost like Jesus Christ. Infallible, so good. Look, I just want to show you this guy. That's Washington. I actually still like Washington. That's Napoleon Bonaparte. I thought those were good guys too. It's really sad. So these are my heroes. I had no bias. I studied history and my narratives were debunked. I would say today that Napoleon Bonaparte was probably a monster. He's a really bad dude. And he certainly wasn't the power. I mean, he was put in power and he was put away. Washington, I think he was a really good dude. I think he was, I don't want to get into all that history today. I just want to reiterate that if we want to break through and we want to know what's going on, if we want to raise children who aren't a part of these these bubbles, these that are boiling bubbles, that can think independently and actually lead. And leading means you can take somebody in a different direction. It means you can stand before a bunch of people. It's so easy to get up in front of a bunch of people and be like, who all believe, it'd be like a Patriots, you know, like football. And you're a Patriots fan because you moved there and you just go along with it. It's so much easier. But to be a true leader, sometimes you have to actually go against your side. You have to be able to reason. And not just to disappoint them, but lead them and say, hey, listen, like that narrative that you're preaching is not correct. Or, you know, like sometimes higher taxes are okay. Not always. Like we are way overtaxed. Okay, we are taxed so bad. I can go into that someday. You don't even know how bad you're taxed until you understand inflation. You're taxed at almost 100% over time. Way overtaxed. But it's not anarchy either. It doesn't mean we should have no taxes or no police or no government. I know people like that. Who think we literally should just have no government and we'd all be better if we just kind of coexisted. That's been tried, and usually it gets so out of hand that people beg for a police force. It's usually actually vigilantes, and then eventually those vigilantes kind of form some protocols, and then they need money because they can't farm anymore, and like that's how police forces form. So I'm definitely not an anarchist. We need some government, but you have to be able to think like that. Like I feel like the liberty movement on the right now is becoming so anti-government because it's become so. We have too much government, absolutely too many laws. It's tyranny. It honestly is. But you can't go to the other side and say that, oh, government's just inherently bad, because we've seen societies where government broke down and it's unimaginable. So anyway, just be a free thinker. Think, study and think. Don't get caught up in a narrative, especially skin color. It makes me crazy. People, it's like you can almost tell like people's narrative based on skin color. Think through the box, one way or the other. If this guy was, if it was racist and this guy down there was killed because of the color of skin, that's totally wrong. Totally wrong. I'm totally against it. But then on the other side of the fact, maybe it wasn't. And you have to be open to both options. You have to be a free thinker. Do not get caught up in this mob mentality. Oh, and I think you've seen the hypocrisy. I think you've seen it where this president does this and everybody's against it. And then this president does the same thing. Like golfing. It's so funny with golfing because it is honestly true, okay? Obama was totally criticized for golfing, and what is he doing to the economy, and he's horrible, and he's always golfing and always on vacation. And Trump golfs too, and I don't care that either one of them does. But it's true. But now that Trump golfs, they're like, that's okay, and he doesn't do it as much as this guy. And then all the people who are like, it's totally okay that Obama golfed, now they're like, Trump's golfing when everything's going to hell. It's like, dude, you're so dumb. You're so dumb. Literally, you're a hypocrite. Literally. It's probably okay for both of them to golf. Now, there was an incident, I know, when I'm not going to get into it. There was an incident when Obama probably shouldn't have been golfing. But the point is that they both do different things. And it just does boggle my mind, the hypocrisy. So many people were against the stimulus package, and Obama was going to bankrupt the country, and now we're doing a stimulus package, and it's necessary because Trump did it. And look, again, I'm not saying it's wrong that Trump did it, but it's just so funny. It's so funny to go back a few years and watch the Democrats talk about how illegal immigrants are destroying the country and they're stealing. Literally, like your favorite Democrats are saying this on camera, including Obama, how they're destroying the middle class and they're hurting African Americans because they're stealing jobs. Literally, that was the Democratic narrative. And then and by the way, Reagan was the guy who was like, no, we're legalizing all of them. They're necessary, because that was a Republican viewpoint. Illegal immigrants, good. Democrats thought it was bad, and now it's completely flipped, and they're making the exact opposite arguments. You're like, dude. And all those other people who were against it, when the Democrats were doing it, the Republicans, they were all for it because they supported Reagan. Now that it's flipped, they're all against it, and you're just like, oh my gosh, it really is like 1984, because we don't have thinkers. We have a two-party system. It's really scary. It's really scary how easily they can lead the masses. And then once you start studying, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to lay it out in Enemies, which it's going to be the last book of this series. It'll blow your mind, and you will know beyond a shadow of a doubt. I barely touch it in this book. Barely touch it. You'll know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's a third party. There is a shadow government. That's not a conspiracy. That's a fact. And let me tell you, the shadow government has never lost an election, I believe, until this time with Trump. I don't know. He could be one of them. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, Obama and absolutely Reagan. Everybody loves Reagan. I think I've debunked him before. Reagan, Bush. You know that Obama, when Obama got into office, I thought he was going to arrest Bush. He hated Bush so much. I was like, man, he's probably going to arrest Bush and throw him in prison. And guess what? Now Bush and Obama's wife are best friends. And remember, Bush hated black people, but now he's best friends with Obama. Let me tell you, It's a narrative. They're dividing the people, and these are the same people. Bush, Obama are the same political party. They absolutely control it. And I know that sounds crazy. This is Revealing School. I just barely mentioned in this, and it was funny because somebody read this book who's very popular, powerful in the homeschooling world, and was reviewing it. And because I said that there really wasn't there was really not a huge difference between the Democrats and the Republicans at the top, not at the bottom, at the top. I'm talking Reagan, Obama, Bush, Clinton. They're all the same people. She wouldn't recommend my book. She was so upset, and she said I didn't cite my sources enough. So I literally went back and cited all my sources, just add like tons of it, just pages and pages, cited everything perfectly, sent it back to her. She still didn't like it because that narrative. She can't think outside of their box. And in her opinion, every Republican is a saint, and the other way, they're bad. And I'm saying, look, it's a one-party system. I'll prove it. And in public school, they devise together, and it's hurting children. So homeschool, be a free thinker, live outside that bubble. Okay, well, I don't want to ramble anymore. I know I've already gone too long. Thank you guys for watching. I hope I didn't say anything offensive. I'm not on any side. I'm on the side of truth. I'm on the side of Christ. I'm on the side of our children. I'm not going to get caught up in this. I'm not going to get caught up in the narratives. I'm not going to lie about people. I'm not going to perpetuate conspiracy theories, but I'm also not going to deny them simply because they sound conspiratorial. I've studied too much history to tell... The last 500 years has been conspiracy after conspiracy. There is you wouldn't say a one world government or new world order, but there is absolutely a group of people that's international, and they absolutely have control of all of us. At least not control of it, I shouldn't say that way, but they have influence, great influence. The public education system, like I talk about, was not started by the U.S. government. The Rockefellers, Carnegie, those guys, they pumped more money into the education system than the federal government at the time. And it wasn't to make your kids... business rivals, okay? Let's say that. When Bill Gates pumps money into the education, it's not because he wants to raise the next Bill Gates. Like, that'll be his kids and his friends. He's not trying to help your kids get that leg up. But I am. I actually am. Anyway, if you trust me. Anyway, I'm going to get going, so I stop rambling. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you guys coming in. I know I'm saying controversial things sometimes, maybe. I try to do it in a respectful way. I definitely don't have a dog in the fight except the truth, and that's why my views over time have changed, because I will just follow the truth, and I'm not going to get caught up in one narrative or the other. I'm not going to condemn Trump just because, but I'm also not going to condemn Obama for it. But I did condemn Obama for some things because he was wrong. But we can't, what's that? Natalie is called Revealing School, and then the next one is education. Yeah. Education's more fun, Natalie. Education is the one that everybody's kind of reading now. It's actually a little thinner. It's actually what to do. It's raising children for greatness. Revealing School, I wrote a while ago, and you'll never look at public education again. I've had people that have been in this movement, the homeschooling movement and anti-school movement. They've read all of, the dumbing kids down and stuff like that, and they read this book, and they just thought it'd be another book, and they're like, oh my gosh. I had no idea. And I had no idea when I wrote it. I've learned so much more, and that'll come out in the last book, The Enemy. And then, gosh, that's going to be a great book. And by the way, Character's almost out. It is almost out. It'll be out this summer for sure. It's really good. And then we'll get into Power. I'm going to teach your kids how to be powerful. It's going to be cool. It's going to be really good. And it's not what you think. But it's going to teach your kids how to be powerful, how to make a world in the difference, how to be a world leader. That's what I'm really trying to create. I want to create world leaders. And then the last book will be The Enemy, because we have to be champions. We do have an enemy. And you can prepare your kid, really great. But that enemy is preparing his own. And he's going to take your kids down. Like he wants to. He wants to destroy him. And he's very good at his game. And so we're going to talk about that. And it won't be what you think. I promise it won't be what you think. If you've read my books before, it's outside of the box always. And I know what you're thinking, like, oh, it's going to be this, or it's going to be like another one of those hokey, I don't know, so many Christian books that I love them. They try hard, but a lot of what they say is hokey. And obviously it's not effective because we're getting our tails kicked, aren't we? But my book will be. It'll be powerful. I'm going to identify the enemy. That's really what that book is. It's going to identify the enemy, and your kids are going to know who they're going up against. And I've always said prep schoolers, rule the world. That's true, but there's a tighter group inside of the prep schools. Most kids go to prep school and just turn out to be normal kids, or they do well later, but there's a subgroup in the prep schools, and they do rule the world, and they're ruthless. And we have nobody. We have nobody that compete with them. Like I said, at the top, they've won every election for a long time. Maybe since the beginning. So of this country. All right, guys, boom, I'm done. I'll ramble and ramble. I'm so bad. Thank you guys so much for coming. If you guys have questions, please leave them below. If you have comments, if you liked it, if something was offensive, don't be offended by anything I say. I'm just speaking off the cuff. I care about everybody who's on my site. I am a very loyal person. This next book on character development talks about loyalty. I'm a loyal person. As far as I'm concerned, if you are subscribed to me, I'm on your side. I'm on your team. Doesn't matter your background. I know we have atheists that follow this, or I don't care if you're Muslim. Like, if you're on my side, like, I support you. I want the best for your kids. Obviously, my one bias is that I'm a Christian, and that's my worldview. That's what I want to promote. But I don't hate anybody, and I welcome everybody here. If you're part of the Maynard family, like, that's part of my community. I'm very loyal to you. I want to help you. I want your kids to be great. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'll talk to you later.